Hey everyone, I just wanted to put out a quick disclaimer before I start this video. I'm going to be talking about snakes, and as I mentioned in the video, it's a really big taboo in Navajo traditional culture. In this video, there are no actual images of snakes, just me talking about them. So if you are afraid to watch the video because you don't want to see a snake, there aren't any actual snakes in the video. I hope you enjoy! The Grand Canyon does have unique ecosystems and even has their own Grand Canyon rattlesnake that lives nowhere else in the world. Gray Mountain is about a 30-minute drive from the Grand Canyon, so maybe there is a type of snake that has been able to grow at an extremely long length. Doing some quick research, I have found that rattlesnakes in Arizona have been recorded growing to about 9 feet at its largest, but average around 5 feet. And the gopher snake can also get up to 6 to 9 feet long. A few years ago, while my family and I were in the Kaibab forest picking piñons, my grandma told me the story of with her mom when they were out picking piñons. They were walking back to the truck, and lying across the road was a snake that stretched from one end to the other, going into and out of the forest. She couldn't see the head and she couldn't see the tail. She had no idea how long this snake really was. 9 feet is still very long for a snake to get, but according to my grandma, the snake she saw was longer than this because it crossed the road all the way across. So, how could a snake get that long? Well, like most of America, the great large predators have been hunted down to nearly extinction. And although there are efforts by the Grand Canyon to bring back the wolf population, the coyote and the mountain lion population are still vastly lower than what they used to be. So this might be able to give the snakes in the area the chance to grow longer than what they used to be. Also, just to note that talking about snakes in the Navajo tradition is a taboo. The animal is believed to be bad luck. There are also other various taboos about snakes. I heard of other stories about there being abnormally large snakes in various areas on the Navajo reservation. Most of the stories I hear are from the forests around Window Rock area. There was even a little incident on one of the road construction pages on the Navajo Nation where someone posted a photo saying, "Oh my goodness, this is one of those giant snakes we hear about." And then other people were like, "No, that's just the tree root system." So it's not just my area that has these tales. I was talking about this with a close friend, and she mentioned a rock formation that looks like a petrified snakehead. She also mentioned that there was a story of how that snake was the one that made the window in the window rock, as it was part of its burrow, because snakes burrow underground, and so this sandstone with a hole in it was made by one of these giant snakes. Navajo mythology does have giant snakes in them, but these are like giant giant snakes like Mothra, King Kong, Godzilla, giant snakes. And stories of these snakes are peppered throughout our culture and our community. My mom told me of a story that her grandma told her that the Red Hill next to where our family sells our jewelry for generations, there is a snake that lives in that hill. And I was thinking when she told me this, thanks for letting us play on that red hill with a giant sleeping snake. But like I mentioned, there are other stories in the community of similar giant snakes. One of those community members shared their story with me on Facebook. And here's his story. My grandfather used to tell us of a small valley by our sheep camp 5 miles from Cameron at the base of Gray Mountain. The valley was about 3 to 5 miles long and ended by the Little Colorado River. He said this valley was made by a giant snake a long time ago. So this kind of sounds like a similar snake to the one that lives under the Red Hills and the one in Window Rock. But I don't think it's the same snake that my grandmother was talking about. So switching gears a little bit more, going into the more unverified region of the internet when I was trying to research more about abnormally large snakes, I came across this YouTube video series called Four Corner Cryptids. The four corners is referring to the 4 states that meet at their corners: Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. All these states are also part of the Navajo Nation, or have part of the Navajo Nation within it. I only watched the video that was talking about a giant 30-foot snake, and the guy was saying this snake was more like an anaconda or a python living in the San Juan River. He gathered stories from locals talking about how they would pass out near the riverbanks and they would wake up in the morning and one of their party mates would be gone and it would look like he was dragged into the river, kind of like how a snake would drag someone in the river. But I don't think an anaconda or a python could live on Gray Mountain because there's no consistent water source like you would need for those aquatic snakes, because you normally hear about anacondas and pythons like living in the Amazon or the Everglades in Florida, where they have become very invasive. But those are very swampy, watery areas, not the 20-year drought of Gray Mountain. Okay, so you see this road here. This is kind of like the road my grandma and great-grandma were on when they were pinyon picking. So you can see the width of the road, and where we were is a very heavily wooded area for where we live. Okay, so sure, it's not like a dense forest like some people are used to, but the roads on top of the mountain are usually like this. You know, you have the 2 sides and then the brush and the trees usually kind of give way. So what my grandma was telling me was that the snake was from here all the way there. You know, she couldn't see the end and she couldn't see the front. And this is a very narrowed lens. Usually when you are walking, you have your peripherals and everything. So usually the field of vision is a little bit wider than this. So the fact that, like the snake just kind of trailed into the forest and from the other side and went all the way across the road, and she couldn't see the end or the head, it was still a really large snake. And my grandma doesn't really like talking about snakes. So the fact that she made a point to talk about this was sort of really special, and I thought it was a very interesting thing about just some of the stories and events that our elders go through, and it's nice to be able to reiterate them or try and keep them alive and a little bit more storied, not storied, but like be able to pass them on in the way our generation will be able to, because her generation and the generations before were very oral story passing down. You know what I mean? Like you tell your stories to your children and your grandchildren, and they tell those stories back down. But obviously, our memory our memory banks have gotten extremely shorter because we don't need to remember anything anymore. We have our little smartphones to remember everything for us, so we don't use it as much. So I'm just trying to preserve a little bit of my family's history and stories and legends by making one of these little videos. I should end this episode saying, so is it possible that there is an abnormally large snake slithering around Gray Mountain? Yeah, it's possible, but I have no proof. These are just some really interesting stories that get people talking about their experiences and their stories from their region. And if you want to hear more local scary stories or ghost stories, be sure to check out Navajo Tea Time's October episode. We'll be doing a sort of campfire scary stories theme episode. Hagonet!